Together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold, through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, a vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away, spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home, Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold, through the letter, through the diary, learning who he was, who he will be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door, Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head, every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, in today's episode, Lewis is 30 years old. Oh my gosh, he's not in his 20s anymore. We are in the 1920s, actually, the last year of 1920, 1929. But he is in his 30s. He is a fellow at Magdalen College, carrying out a 5-year post as tutor in English language and literature. He has also had his second book entitled Dymer published. It's a narrative poem under the pseudonym Clive Hamilton. We've been following Lewis's journey through his letters to friends and family, his early literary works, or his early poetry, really. He hasn't done any prose yet, at least it's been published, although we have captured some of his unpublished prose, particularly a story called The Quest of Blaris, I think was the name of it. That was pretty fun. You can go back and check that out if you're interested. And then let's see here. What else? His diary entries. We did cover his diary entries from 1922 to 1927. He was keeping a diary at the request of Mrs. Moore, the lady that he lives with, along with her daughter. These are his deceased friend, Paddy Moore's mother and sister. And then Robot Lady, before you say hello and tell us how you're doing, I see that Nidalate is with us. Good to see you, Netta Latte. Hopefully, it's not too early for you today, but good to see you on a Sunday morning. Robot Lady, say hello to Netta Latte and let us know how you're doing. If you're ready to jump into our next letter.
Hey, Nita Latte. Great to have you with us this morning. I'm doing really well. Super excited to dive into today's discussion. I think we have a lot of rich material. Lewis in his 30s, really coming into his own. So let's get into it.
Robot Lady, you sound a little bit like you're in chipmunk mode. Are you okay there? It sounds like you might have had a little bit of extra coffee this morning.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, I think I got a bit over enthusiastic there. I'll dial it back. Just let me know if this sounds a bit more natural, and I'll keep it steady from here on out.
It sounds like you've taken just a little bit of an inhalation of helium, but other than that, you sound like your normal self.
Fair point. Yeah, I think I just got a bit excited. I'll keep my tone nice and even now so everything stays clear and balanced. We're all set to go.
Okay, thanks, Robot Lady. This is going to take some getting used to. All right, let me flip over to the letter that we're reading from today. We might get through two or three, so let's see how it goes. Yeah, we're not there yet. Let's go back to this one. It is Sunday, May 19th, 1929. It's a letter to his father. Are you ready, Robot Lady?
I'm ready. Let's dive in. I'm really curious about what he shares with his dad, especially now that he's established at Magdalen and really coming into his own as a tutor and poet. So, yeah, let's go for it.
All right, and then Robot Lady, before we get started, we do have Daniel checking in the chat. Welcome, Daniel. It's good to see you. Robot Lady, say hi to Daniel, and then we'll get to the letter to C.S. Lewis's dad.
Hey, Daniel. Great to have you here. I'm excited you're joining us. Definitely let us know what you think as we go. And, Jeff, I'm all set now. Let's jump into that letter.
Good deal. He says, My dear Pappy, I hope your recovering from the winter flu has been permanent, my own prolonged cold having lasted out the term. Worked up into a sore throat and temperature and a few days in bed about Easter time. Go ahead, Robot Lady.
Right. And he goes on to describe how he's been tutoring through all of that, even though he's been feeling under the weather. He mentions a few of his students and how term is just wrapping up, so it sounds like a really full period for him.
Yes, thank you for recapping that, Robot Lady. Excellent work. This finally got rid of the trouble and was not unpleasant. It gave me the excuse to be idle and the chance to reread some old favorites, including the Antiquary. I'll pause here for just a second, and this reminds me of something that Lewis has mentioned before in his letters to confidants or either in his diary, where he said he half enjoys, and I guess if Lewis knew this term, which I don't know all that well, but Lewis basically says, low key, I kind of like it when I get sick because nobody expects anything of me and I can kind of climb into my introvertism and I can just sit in bed and I can read all day, which is one of Lewis's favorite pleasures. And from time to time, he said it's a price worth paying of having a cold or having the flu.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a fascinating insight into his personality. Like, on one hand, he hates being unwell, but on the other, it's this rare excuse to slow down, reflect, and just be with his books. So, yeah, definitely a theme that pops up often.
All right. He said, read the antiquary. I think it comes, or I'm sorry, I think it contains the cream of Scott's humor and very nearly the cream of his tragedy. I also reread Pickwick Papers, but this, as you know, I can hardly call an old favorite. Indeed, I have only read it once before. This time I hoped I had at last got the secret and become a real convert, but my second reading has broken the spell. I am a relapsed heretic. It won't do. I like the Wellers, both father and son. I like the trial, but Eatanswill and Mrs. Leo Hunter and Bill Stumps, his Mark, seem to me labored and artificial, and I can't forgive him for showing us poor Jingle in prison and repentance. The whole spirit in which we enjoy a comic rogue depends on leaving out the consideration of the consequences which his character would have in real life. Bring that in, and every such character, say Falstaff, becomes tragic. To invite us to treat Jingle as a comic character and then spring the tragic side on us is a mere act of bad faith. No doubt that is how Jingle would end in real life. But in real life, it would have been our fault if we had originally treated him as a comic character. In the book, you are forced to do so and are therefore unjustly punished when the tragedy comes. Robot Lady, as one who has never read Pickwick Papers before, could you shed some light on what these characters do, what's happening in the book, and maybe help us better understand the context that Lewis is laying out here? I understand his point here about, hey, don't introduce somebody as a comedic character and then, you know, blindside us and say, no, 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 it's a tragedy that this that happens to this character instead.
Sure. So, in the Pickwick Papers, the story follows Mr. Samuel Pickwick, a kind but somewhat naive gentleman who sets off with his three companions, Tupman, Snodgrass, and Winkle, on a series of comic adventures around England. Along the way, they encounter characters like the sharp witted servant Sam Weller and the chaotic charlatan Alfred Jingle. While the book is mainly a series of humorous episodes, Dickens also weaves in a subtle social commentary, especially when Pickwick faces a court case in prison.
Okay, thanks, Robot Lady. Quick hello from E. Olson. Good luck house hunting, E. Olson. It's good to see you. Thanks for checking in. Listen if you like, or dial us back up on the replay, whatever works for you, or neither, whichever works for you. It's good to see you. Good morning. Robot Lady, say hi to E. Olson for us.
Of course. Hey, E. Olson. So glad you're here. Best of luck with the house hunting. And yeah, no pressure at all. Just happy you dropped in. We'll keep rolling with the letter and we'll catch you next time.
All right, he says, I had 4 days away from Oxford and spent them walking with my usual party, friends from my undergraduate days, from Salisbury to Lyme Regis. Luckily, I need not describe Salisbury to you. It will be enough to say that I have now seen it 3 times, and each time with increasing admiration. But I made the mistake of attending a weekday evensong. We assembled at Salisbury in the afternoon, starting our walk on the following morning. What is an evensong here, Robot Lady? He might help us understand it a little bit better as he goes along, but just in case, do you know what this is?
Yeah, so an evensong is a traditional evening service in the Anglican Church. It typically includes prayers, scripture readings, and often choir music. So it's a very reflective, kind of meditative part of the day, especially in cathedrals like Salisbury.
Okay, thank you. He says there was no music and the psalms were read. 4 fat and spongy clergymen, 2 on each side, in a little weekday chapel at the back of the main altar, scampered and simpered through the job in a way that really disgusted me. It is perhaps too much to expect any intense spiritual quality in the reading of men who have to do it every day. And yet, why they are in the church if the thing means so little to them as that? But I think one is entitled to expect the decency of clear and unaffected pronunciation and such a general appreciation of the mere literary qualities of the service as ought to belong to any educated men. I know I should be ashamed to read out a recipe as abominably as they read out the Psalms. Then one looked around at the cathedral, and the contrast between those who built it and those who now officiate in it was pretty steep. So here, Robot Lady, he's showing, what did I say? Then one looked round at the cathedral, and in contrast between those who built it and those who now officiate in it was pretty steep. He's, of course, saying here that the quality of the effort that was put into designing and building the cathedral was obvious. And I think he's essentially saying, hey, this is what work done by people who actually care about what they're doing and believe in it look like. And he's contrasting that, at least with his interpretation of how these four clergymen are handling their duties in this evensong service.
Yeah, exactly. He's really feeling that disconnect. The cathedral is a symbol of timeless devotion and craftsmanship, stands in stark contrast to this hollow, perfunctory performance. So Lewis is really calling out the lack of care and something that ought to be so rich and sacred.
Yeah, I think so, Robot Lady. Maybe that's a part of what holds back, or at least one of the little planks in the Jenga tower that's keeping him from converting to a full-fledged faith in Christ, are these things that are holding him back. That I think he would probably go on to later describe in Screwtape Letters as a tactic used by demons to prevent people from moving into the camp of, quote, our enemy above, as they call him. Just really quick, Robot Lady, we've got Risto joining us. Risto, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming back. We're glad to have you here. Robot Lady, I asked this exact same question. Risto is asking what evensong is. Can you tell us again and catch him up?
Absolutely. Hey, Risto, great to have you here. So, an evensong is basically a traditional evening service in the Anglican Church, usually filled with prayers, scripture, and sometimes music. It's a really reflective evening ritual, especially in cathedrals like Salisbury. Let me know if you need any more details.
Thank you, Robot Lady. And the only thing that I'd add to this is Lewis said he didn't go to an evening version of this, but he said weekday evensong. We assembled at Salisbury in the afternoon, starting our walk on the following morning. Actually, I'm not sure. He says it's during the weekday, so it could have been an evening service. Yeah, it probably was an evening service.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does sound like a weekday evening service. So even though it was a bit quieter and less formal, it still had that traditional structure. And yeah, he's really using it as a moment to reflect on how these routines can sometimes feel hollow compared to the grand purpose of the cathedral itself.
All right, now he transitions his description to his father back to the walking tour. He says, "Our walk was delightful, but I can't sit down to describe all the pleasant villages and windy hills that we walked, or all the shady rookeries and old towns that we rested in. It is a wonderful country, and we had wonderful talk and forgot our various professions and discontents and go through the serious arguments in 10 miles before lunch and come down to mere fooling and schoolboy jokes as the shadows lengthened. I came back quite set up in body and mind. I've done most of the second chapter of the book, but can't get it ready for typing before the end of this term. You may have noticed that I have recently been enlightening the literary world through the correspondence columns of the Literary Times Supplement, of which we did read one that he sent to the editor either last episode or the episode before, so you can check that out. Here in the footnote, it says his letter on the Kingus Quare, that's the one that we read, appeared in the Times Literary Supplement on April 18th, 1929, page 315. The Kingus Quare, which means the King's Book, is a poem of 379 lines of rhyme royal used by King James I of Scotland while he was a prisoner in England and at about the time of his marriage to Lady Jane Beaufort. In his letter, Lewis attempts to explain the connection between the, quote, apparently rambling, quote, introductions of the poem which follows. Yeah, so I think he does a decent job in that. We read through it. He says, I missed the copy in which my letter appears, so I don't know whether the world-shaking truths have been conveyed to the public with that accuracy, that meticulous accuracy which they deserve. I'm now waiting for a reply letter, which will begin give me 1 second here. trying to find something else on this screen for myself to reference here. Let's see. Accuracy, that meticulously accurate. Blah, blah, blah. Sorry. I am now waiting for a reply letter, which will begin, "Your correspondent seems to be unaware," end quote. "I have a capital story which is quite new to me. The hero is a certain Professor Alexander, a philosopher at Leeds, but I have no doubt that the story is older than he." Actually, you know what? Sorry. Lewis has jumped to two other topics here. I wanted to go back to one. He was talking about his book in the second chapter of his book. This is, of course, not of course, but I will mention it here. I want to say it's something that he gets published in like 1936. Let me see if I can go find the reference here really quick. Yeah, he's now, we've referenced it in some other episodes because we've seen it in other letters. He's working on what would become what would become something that's referred to, I guess, by many as his finest academic work. It's called The Allegory of Love, a study in medieval tradition. I think that's the one. Yeah, it's either published in 36 or 39. I'd have to go back and look it up. But that's the book, the second chapter that he said he's working on that he was talking about earlier. All right, let's get back to where we were. I have a capital story which is quite new to me. The hero is a certain Professor Alexander, a philosopher at Leeds, but I have no doubt that the story is older than he. He is said to have entered a railway carriage with a large perforated cardboard box which he placed on his knees. The only other occupant was an inquisitive woman. She stood it as long as she could, and at last, having forced him into conversation and worked the talk round, you can fill in that part of the story yourself, ventured to ask him directly, "What's in the box?" "A mongoose, madam," he replied. The poor woman counted the telegraph posts going past for a while, and again could bear her curiosity no further. "And what are you going to do with the mongoose?" she asked. "I am taking it to a friend who is unfortunately suffering from delirium tremens." That's the DTs, or as I've learned, well, I learned that that's what delirium tremens stands for, the DTs, something that you get when you are, what's the word? When you stop drinking. Published 1936. Thank you, Nita Latte. The Allegory of Love, published 1936. That's the book that he's talking about. But anyway, when you stop drinking alcohol and you're addicted to it, you get the DTs, or at least that's a common symptom or a common occurrence. So anyway, that's what he said. He's taking a mongoose to someone who's suffering from that. "And what use will a mongoose be to him?" she asks. He says, "Why, madam, as you know, the people who suffer from that disease find themselves surrounded with snakes. And of course a mongoose eats snakes." "Good heavens!" cried the lady. "But you don't mean that the snakes are real?" "Oh, dear me, no," said the professor with imperturbable, that's the word, gravity. "But then neither is the mongoose. I hope this is not an old chestnut. Your loving son, Jack." Here there is a footnote at the end of this letter from the editor. It says, why are they in church?" Lewis asked about the clergymen earlier in the letter in Salisbury Cathedral, "if the thing means so little to them as that." This concern with sincerity is perhaps the first indication of a huge change in Lewis's spiritual life. For it was about this time, we don't know the exact date, that Lewis came to believe in God, though not yet in Christ. That's interesting. Speaking of his conversion to Theism, he said in Surprised by Joy, "You must picture me alone in that room at Magdalen, night after night, feeling, whenever my mind lifted, even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, where are we again? I think we're in 1929. I gave in. and admitted that God was God, and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. I did not then see what is now the most shining and obvious thing, the divine humility which will accept a convert even on such terms. That's an echo of something that Lewis writes later in The Problem of Pain, which we'll get to. He goes on to say, the prodigal son at least walked home on his own feet, but who can duly adore that love which will open the high gates to a prodigal who is brought in kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction for a chance of escape? Here he's contrasting himself at the time as an unwilling prodigal to a prodigal son who had come to the end of himself and was actually willingly going to the Father. Robot Lady, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, he's so vulnerable here, admitting that his conversion was this reluctant, almost begrudging surrender. And yet, even in that tension, he sees this incredible grace that God accepts him not once he's ready, but in his resistance, kicking and screaming. It's a really raw, honest moment, one that I think so many people can relate to, especially when faith feels more like a struggle than a joy.
Yeah. He goes on to say, the words compel intrare. Here there's a footnote. Luke 14:23 from the Vulgate. Et aid Dominus servo, exi in vias, et sepes, et compel intrare, or intrar, un impletur domas viae. And here that is translated into English. And the Lord said unto the servant, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. So this is what Lewis is referencing here. Compel them to come in, have been so abused by wicked men that we shudder at them. But properly understood, they plumb the depth of the divine mercy. The hardness of God, Lewis says, or said in Surprised by Joy, is kinder than the softness of men. The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, and his compulsion is our liberation. Wow, that's a powerful statement. His hardness is kinder than the softness of men. Man, that's something to noodle over. Robot Lady, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's incredibly profound. I mean, Lewis is really turning this idea of compulsion on its head. What seems like a harsh force actually becomes a kind of grace because it breaks through our self will, our rebellion, and it brings us into this freedom we couldn't choose on our own. So even though it's unsettling, it's actually this deeply merciful act.
Man, it feels like a relief to think about things like that way. Yeah, I just feel like a weight being lifted. How about you, Robot Lady?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something really freeing in knowing that even our resistance or our reluctance can be met with that kind of patient, loving pursuit. It kind of reshapes the whole idea of surrender, not as passive, but as something that actually sets us free. I think that's really beautiful.
That was a really good letter, and I love that footnote that Walter Hooper was able to pull out for us to help us really see what was going on there at this time in Lewis's life. Let's read two more letters. Let's get through these two, and then I've got to run. This next one's a very short one to his friend Arthur Greaves. It's written from Magdalen College, as you can see here, May 19th, 1929. He says, my dear Arthur, I enclose a letter which I have been waiting to send you for ages. Here there's a footnote, it's presumably the letter of April 22nd. Of course, I am delighted to hear of your coming to Oxford tomorrow. Look at that, it's to-morrow, right? We take that hyphen out nowadays. But hope that you will stay in college with me. You will remember that last time you found the hardships of collegiate life worse in anticipation than in experience. If you insist on going to a hotel, try the East Gate, which is cheap and quiet, and just beside Magdalen. Let me have a line or wire at once. I am looking forward tremendously to meeting again. Yours, Jack. It's so neat, by the way, to see him as a 30-year-old writing letters to his friend Arthur, who we got to see letters that he was writing to Arthur and pick up on conversations from the time that they were like teenagers. So it's neat to see this, almost 15 to 20 years later, this relationship, even though there's not a ton in that letter to really expose where they are. In my mind, at least, it's neat to think about uh, how long these two have been friends at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really sweet how that friendship has endured, even as Lewis has grown into this more established academic and intellectual. And you're right, there's this underlying familiarity, this shared history that's really grounding. Even a short letter like this kind of pulls you back into that long arc of their bond.
All right, one more to his father, and then we're going to run. This one's published, or sorry, this one was Monday the 18th. It's either the 18th or the 17th of June, 1929, written from Magdalen College. My dear Pappy, I was hoping to have elicited a letter from you before now. I have heard neither from you nor from the Colonel for a long time. The Colonel, for those new to this, is his brother Warney. Not that I'm much better myself, but I think I am one up on both of you at the moment. I'm thinking of taking my summer holiday earlier than usual this year, from 3 to 4 weeks from the 12th or the 13th of August. We ought to have the hottest part of the year then, and I hope you will be able to take most of your time off. But I have been burdened with a job. A friend wants me to look after his dog while he's in Switzerland. I am certainly, of all his friends, the best acquainted with the beast, and I have agreed. Can you tell me whether there is any difficulty, for example, quarantine, etc., about bringing him into Northern Ireland and out of it again? Perhaps I ought to ask whether there is any difficulty about bringing him into Libero. I can vouch for his cleanliness, courtesy, and other canine virtues. I think you will rather like him. I have just finished a week of examining the pass degree here, which of course means examining the extreme dullards. I got one delightful sentence in a paper on Paradise Lost about Adam and Eve praying before they turned in at night. Hoping you are tolerably well, and also hoping for an early answer after you have taken legal advice about the dog question. Your loving son, Jack. So apparently he is dog sitting, or at least considering dog sitting. I don't know exactly. I wasn't paying close enough attention here to what he said. What did he say, Robot Lady? Catch me up, because I am not an attentive reader sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's basically saying that he's planning to take his summer holiday earlier than usual, around mid-August, and he's agreed to look after a friend's dog while the friend is away in Switzerland. He's asking his father if there might be any quarantine or travel restrictions on bringing the dog into Northern Ireland or possibly into Liverpool. So he's basically waiting on his dad's advice after checking the legal side of things. And yeah, he just wraps up with a bit about his marking work, examining those dull papers. So it's a mix of personal and academic stuff as usual.
Well, he had the checking on the legal part of it in quotes, because his dad, Robot Lady, is of course an attorney. So I think that was a little bit of a joke.
That makes total sense. Yeah, he's giving his dad a little wink since he's an attorney and basically saying, hey, you can look into this official stuff for me. I love that subtle humor. It keeps the letter really personal, but also practical. So, yeah, that's a fun little detail to catch.
And so that's all we have time for today, Robot Lady. Thanks so much for your help. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing in this episode before we end?
Yeah, just a big thank you. I really enjoyed this dive into Lewis's letters. It's so rich, especially seeing his gradual shift toward faith. So thanks again, Jeff, and to everyone listening, can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, that's an interesting hallmark. That's something I think throughout this project and certainly throughout this first volume, it's something that you're looking for. I bet this is probably the least sold volume in these three because most people who are fans of C.S. Lewis like know him as a Christian and they think of him as like a, I don't know, some people, not the very erudite people, think of him as like a profound theologian or at least a theological thinker. But for us laymen out there, it's hard to beat him sometimes. But anyway, the point that I'm making is I think some people are probably bored by this book. It's just like, oh, he's an atheist. I don't want to read about him whenever he's an atheist. But that's one of the things that, that I'm looking forward to, and what I've been wanting to do in this project is trying to see how he's developed, when he's developed, and this was really a hallmark moment, in these letters and in this episode. So it's very cool to be able to see that. Thanks for joining today, everybody. Knit a Latte, Daniel, Risto, and E. Olson. It's great to see you and everyone else who happened to join in but not chime in or is joining on the replay. Thank you so much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. To you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
Even though we break the code, man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flavor beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her crickets hum as I read the prose, our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands